Close your eyes for a moment and picture this: the rhythmic beat of drums echoing through narrow stone streets, the haunting melody of a flute drifting from a temple courtyard, the collective voices of laborers rising in song as they haul massive stones under the scorching sun. This wasn't just background noise in the ancient world. It was the heartbeat of civilization. Music wasn't something people merely listened to. It was a force that shaped their very existence, woven into every moment from birth to death, from sacred rituals to the most mundane tasks. Today, we're stepping into the soundscape of history to uncover the extraordinary role music played in ancient daily life, and how these ancient harmonies still resonate with us in ways you might not expect. Think about the last time music moved you. Maybe it lifted your spirits on a tough day or brought back a flood of memories. Now imagine a world where music held even greater power, where it wasn't just art but a tool for survival, a bridge to the divine, and a glue that held communities together. In ancient Egypt, priests used hypnotic chants to commune with gods, believing the right melody could unlock the heavens. In Greece, parents sang specific lullabies to protect their children from evil spirits, while Roman soldiers marched to the pulse of war drums, their courage amplified by the collective rhythm. Music was everywhere, and it wasn't passive. It was alive, purposeful, and utterly essential. What's truly remarkable is how much of this ancient sonic world still lingers in our lives today. The scales we sing, the instruments we play, even the way we use music to mark life's biggest moments, it all has roots stretching back thousands of years. But here's the question we'll explore together. Why did music matter so deeply to these civilizations? What secrets do these ancient sounds hold about human nature, about the way we connect, grieve, celebrate, and endure? As we journey from the bustling markets of Mesopotamia to the quiet corners of Celtic villages, we'll piece together a story that's as much about us as it is about them. So turn up the volume, not just on your speakers, but on your curiosity, because history's playlist is about to reveal surprises that will change how you hear the world. In the dim glow of oil lamps with incense curling through the air, priests in ancient Egypt would raise their voices in hymns so potent they were thought to shake the gates of the underworld. These weren't just songs, they were sacred keys, believed to summon gods like Osiris from the realm of the dead. Every note, every rhythm was meticulously crafted, because in their eyes, music wasn't just art, it was a language the divine could understand. Picture the great temple of Ammon at Karnak, where musicians played harps and sistrums, their melodies echoing off towering columns, a sound so powerful it was said to nourish the gods themselves. Across the Mediterranean, the Greeks tuned their lyres to honor Apollo, god of music and light. They believed harmony wasn't just pleasing to the ear, it reflected the order of the cosmos. When a priest plucked the strings, it wasn't merely a performance. It was a prayer, a way to align human chaos with celestial perfection. Even Pythagoras, the mathematician, was obsessed with music's divine geometry, proving that the intervals between notes followed the same ratios as the orbits of planets. To them, music was math made audible, a secret code to the universe. Meanwhile, in ancient India, Vedic priests chanted syllables with such precision that a single mispronunciation was thought to disrupt the balance of existence. These weren't melodies you'd hum casually. They were sonic rituals passed down orally for generations, believed to summon rain, heal the sick, or even bend reality. The vibration of each word was considered as vital as its meaning because sound itself was sacred. Fast forward to today, and you'll still hear echoes of this belief in practices like mantra meditation, where repetition of certain tones is said to calm the mind and awaken spiritual energy. What's fascinating is how these ancient traditions all point to the same idea. Music wasn't just something you heard, it was something you felt in your bones, a force that could alter moods, minds, and maybe even destinies. Whether it was the haunting drone of a Tibetan singing bowl or the ecstatic drumming of Dionysian rites, every culture discovered this truth independently. That's no coincidence. It suggests something profound about human nature, that we've always sensed music's power to connect us to something larger than ourselves. So the next time you lose yourself in a favorite song, remember, you're not just listening, you're participating in a tradition as old as civilization, one that once made kings kneel and gods listen. Those ancient priests chanting under starry skies, they'd recognize exactly what you're feeling, that shiver down your spine when the right note hits, that moment when sound becomes something sacred. The oldest musical instrument ever discovered wasn't made of gold or polished wood. It was carved from the wing bone of a griffin vulture over 40,000 years ago. Found in a German cave, this delicate flute tells us something extraordinary. Even before written language, before cities or farms, humans were already obsessed with turning breath into beauty. But this wasn't just about entertainment. When a Neolithic musician played that bone flute, they were likely calling to spirits, mimicking animal cries for the hunt, or binding their community together in moments of fear or celebration. Fast forward to Mesopotamia, where the famous bull-headed lyre of Ur, adorned with lapis lazuli and gold, wasn't just an instrument, it was a cosmic symbol. Its bull's head represented strength, its strings the threads of fate, and when a priest played it, they weren't just performing, they were channeling the voice of the gods. In China, the Guqin's 7 silk strings held layers of meaning. Confucius himself played this zither, believing its restrained melodies could cultivate moral character. Each part of the instrument symbolized nature. The round soundboard represented heaven, the flat bass stood for earth, and the 13 inlaid pearl markers marked the lunar months. To pluck those strings was to harmonize with the universe. Meanwhile, in the Andes, conch shell trumpets blasted across mountaintops, their eerie wails carrying messages between villages, while in Africa, the Mbera's metallic tines whispered ancestral secrets. Every material was chosen with intention. Turtle shells for drums because their hardness created crisp beats, reeds for pipes because they mimicked the human voice, bronze for Zhou dynasty bells because their purity of tone reflected social order. The deeper the bell's pitch, the higher the rank of its owner. But music wasn't confined to temples or palaces. Picture a Babylonian construction site where workers hauling bricks chanted in unison, their voices rising and falling with each heave of a rope. Or an Egyptian vineyard where grape stompers kept time with clapping and song, turning labor into rhythm. Even the humblest tools became instruments. A farmer's sickle might double as a percussion instrument during harvest festivals, a weaver's loom clicking in time like a metronome. These everyday sounds reveal a truth we often forget. In the ancient world, music wasn't separate from life. It was the pulse of life itself, woven into the fabric of work, worship, and wonder. What's astonishing is how these ancient instruments still speak to us today. The Aboriginal didgeridoo's drone, created over 60,000 years ago, mirrors the electronic bass lines of modern music. The Mesopotamian double reed instrument, the predecessor of the oboe, still echoes in Middle Eastern orchestras. When a musician today plucks a harp or blows into a flute, they're touching the same vibrations that once stirred souls in forgotten kingdoms. These instruments weren't just tools, they were time machines carrying emotions and ideas across millennia. So next time you hear a song, ask yourself, How many generations have danced to this same human need to turn noise into meaning, to make the air around us vibrate with stories? Imagine the backbreaking labor of hauling massive stone blocks up the Great Pyramids, slopes under the desert sun. Now picture that work not in silence, but in song. Ancient Egyptian tomb paintings reveal rowers on the Nile chanting in perfect unison, their voices rising and falling with each pull of the oars, transforming exhaustion into rhythm. This wasn't just about passing the time, it was neuroscience at work long before the term existed. Studies now show rhythmic music reduces perceived effort by up to 12%, something these laborers understood instinctively. Their work songs created a biological metronome, syncing heartbeats and breathing to the task, turning scattered individuals into a single, efficient machine. On the opposite side of the Mediterranean, Greek olive harvesters sang as they beat the branches, their melodies matching the sway of their bodies. Hesiod's writings describe how these songs carried hidden instructions, a fast tempo for urgent work, a slower one for delicate tasks, effectively turning lyrics into an ancient form of time management. In Rome's silver mines, enslaved workers sang not just to coordinate hammer strikes, but to assert their humanity. The clang of pickaxes became percussion, their voices a defiant reminder that even in chains they could create beauty. Archaeologists have found grooves in mine walls where tools wore down in rhythmic patterns, silent evidence of centuries-old work songs. This tradition of labor music spanned continents. In China's Han Dynasty, farmers planting rice sang in call and response patterns, their voices carrying across flooded fields like an agricultural algorithm, each verse marking a row completed. West African textile workers wove proverbs into their songs, passing down wisdom with every shuttle's click. The Maori of New Zealand timed their canoe paddles to chants that mimicked ocean waves, blending practicality with poetry. What united these traditions was more than just utility. It was the transformative power of shared sound. A group singing together experiences synchronized brain waves, a phenomenon modern scientists call neural coupling. Essentially, music literally wired these ancient workers' minds together. You can still hear echoes of this today in the call and response of stevedores loading cargo ships, or the rhythmic shouts of firefighters hoisting hoses. Even the beeps of a modern warehouse scanner follow the same principal audio cues, replacing ancient chants to pace work. When athletes synchronize their movements to a stadium chant or soldiers match their march to a cadence, they're tapping into the same primal toolkit that built pyramids and harvested empires. The next time you find yourself humming while doing chores, you're not just distracting yourself, you're participating in one of humanity's oldest survival strategies, turning struggle into symphony. Long before ink touched parchment, the human voice carried the weight of history, not in dry recitation, but in soaring melodies that clung to memory like burrs to clothe. In the flickering firelight of Mesopotamian courtyards, bards didn't just tell the story of Gilgamesh, they sang it, their voices rising and falling with the hero's triumphs and sorrows. Each musical phrase acted as a mental hook, the rhythm making 12,000 lines of epic poetry impossible to forget. This wasn't entertainment, it was an ancient copyright system, preserving laws, genealogies, and sacred texts with near-perfect accuracy across centuries. The Celtic Druids took this further, encoding their entire legal system into intricate songs. A single misplaced note could alter the meaning of a land dispute or marriage contract, so apprentices trained for 20 years to become living libraries. Meanwhile, in the Himalayas, Tibetan monks still chant the Tengya scriptures, over 200,000 verses passed down unchanged for a millennium, their monotone delivery scientifically proven to enhance recall. Confucius saw music's educational power differently. He taught that mastering the kin zither wasn't about technical skill, but about tuning one's character. The right melody could instill benevolence, the wrong one breed discord, an idea that echoes in modern studies linking music education to emotional intelligence. Africa's griots perfected this art, weaving history into hypnotic patterns of call and response. A Mali elder singing about the 13th century ruler Sundiata Keita wasn't just recounting events. The melody's contours marked droughts, battles, and alliances like auditory timeline. Similarly, Aboriginal songlines transformed geography into melody. Every hill, waterhole, and boundary mapped to specific musical phrases, allowing navigation across thousands of miles without maps. Today's classroom rhymes, from the alphabet song to periodic table raps, are distant cousins of these ancient techniques. Neuroscientists now understand why they work. Music activates multiple brain regions simultaneously, creating redundant memory pathways. When you struggle to recall a fact alone, singing its musical counterpart lights up the hippocampus like a festival lantern. Even surgeons use melodic mnemonics to memorize complex procedures, proving that modern science is just catching up to what ancient cultures knew instinctively, that when knowledge wears melody as its skin, it becomes immortal. The next time a catchy jingle sticks in your head, consider this. You're experiencing the same cognitive superpower that preserved civilizations. Those Mesopotamian bards chanting under the stars weren't just performers, they were the original cloud storage, their voices the servers that kept humanity's data safe long before silicon existed. In the hushed chambers of an ancient Greek healing temple, patients didn't just receive herbs or potions, they were prescribed melodies. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, tuned lyres to specific modes, believing the Dorian scale could steady a racing heart while the Phrygian mode might lift a depressed spirit. This wasn't superstition, it was early biomusicology. The Greeks observed how certain rhythms slowed breathing, how melodies could quiet tremors, phenomena modern science now links to music's ability to regulate the autonomic nervous system. Scrolls from Egypt's Temple of Hathor take this further, detailing sonic treatments for everything from insomnia to digestive woes. One papyrus instructs physicians to chant vowel sounds over a patient's injury, the vibrations thought to accelerate healing, a practice eerily echoed in today's sound baths and vibroacoustic therapy. Venture north to the Siberian tundra, and you'd find shamans beating drums at speeds of 4 to 7 beats per second, a rhythm that coincidentally matches the brain's theta waves. In these trance states, both healer and patient experienced altered consciousness, what neuroscientists now recognize as a gateway to neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. The Cherokee did something similar with river cane flutes, playing specific intervals to retune a person's energy, while Ayurvedic practitioners in India aligned ragas with the body's circadian rhythms, dawn melodies to energize, evening ragas to unwind. Pythagoras took this further, conducting experiments that would make a modern lab proud. He discovered that plucking strings at precise mathematical ratios, what we now call perfect fifths or fourths, could alter mood and even alleviate pain. His followers built special chambers where patients slept surrounded by vibrating strings, a therapy that might seem eccentric until you consider today's ultrasound treatments or the way hospitals use lullabies to stabilize premature infants' heart rates. The thread connecting these ancient practices isn't just belief, it's biology. When a Tibetan singing bowl's hum resonates at 110 Hz, it stimulates the vagus nerve, just as predicted in thousand-year-old tantric texts. Modern MRI scans show how Gregorian chants reduce cortisol levels by up to 25%, while West African gem rhythms trigger the same endorphin release as a runner's high. Even the placebo effect finds its match in music. Babylonian physicians noted that patients improved more when treatments were sung rather than spoken, a phenomenon now attributed to music's unique ability to activate the brain's reward pathways. What's striking isn't that these cultures got it right, it's how they arrived at these insights without microscopes or clinical trials. They listened to the body's responses, observed nature's patterns, and trusted that harmony outside could create harmony within. Today's playlists for focus, sleep, or anxiety are just the latest iteration of this ancient wisdom. So the next time you press play to unwind after a stressful day, remember, you're not just streaming music. You're plugging into an unbroken lineage of sonic healing, one that understood millennia ago what science is still catching up to. Sometimes the best medicine doesn't come in a pill. It comes in a melody. Picture the torch-lit courtyards of Babylon during the New Year's festival, where the air thrummed with the buzz of lyres and the sharp scent of roasting lamb. Musicians wove through the crowd, their fingers dancing over strings as guests reclined on cushions, debating philosophy between sips of date wine. This wasn't just a party, it was a social symphony where every note reinforced hierarchies, sealed business deals, and even negotiated peace treaties. The Babylonians understood something profound. When people share music, they share more than sound. They synchronize their breath, their heartbeats, their very sense of time. Half a world away, in the marble halls of ancient Athens, symposium hosts hired professional flute girls to set the mood for their all-male drinking parties. But these weren't background tunes. The music shaped the evening's entire arc. A lively melody might kick off debates about democracy, while a slower, melancholic tune signaled time for poetry recitals. Plato himself warned that certain musical modes could incite drunken chaos or, worse, moral decay. The Greeks knew music wasn't just entertainment, it was a social thermostat, dialing collective emotions up or down with precision. Meanwhile, along the Pacific Northwest coast, indigenous nations gathered for potlatch ceremonies that could last days. The rhythmic pounding of log drums wasn't just for dancing, it was a living contract. Each beat marked the exchange of gifts, the settling of disputes, the passing of titles. When a chief's family commissioned a new song for the event, they weren't just showing off. They were encoding their lineage into sound, creating an auditory ledger that guests would carry home and remember for generations. Fast forward to today, and you'll spot these ancient blueprints everywhere. That wedding reception where everyone awkwardly sways to Celebration by Kool and the Gang. It's the direct descendant of Babylonian feast music, designed to turn strangers into a temporary tribe. The pulsing bass at a concert that makes 30,000 fans move as one. That's the same neural coupling that once bonded potlatch participants. Even the background jazz in a modern cocktail bar serves the same purpose as those Athenian flute girls, guiding the social temperature, encouraging laughter or intimacy on cue. What's remarkable is how little the core ingredients have changed. Swap the lyre for a DJ deck, the symposium for a rooftop party, and the human response remains identical. We still use music to mark transitions, first dances at weddings, graduation marches, even the birthday songs ritualized cheer. These moments aren't just traditions, they're time capsules preserving an ancient truth. When we make music together, we're not just connecting with each other, we're plugging into a primal network, one that's been transmitting joy, solidarity, and belonging since the first drum echoed across a moonlit plain. So the next time you find yourself tapping your foot at a street festival or belting out lyrics with strangers at a concert, remember, you're not just having fun. You're participating in a ritual older than writing, one that has always whispered the same essential message. Alone, we are single notes. Together, we become a song. The piercing cry of a Roman tuba wasn't just noise, it was a battle algorithm. When 20,000 soldiers moved as one across smoke-choked fields, their ears, not their eyes, guided them. A short blast meant advance, a wavering note signaled retreat, 3 sharp tones called for flanking maneuvers. In the cacophony of clashing steel and screaming men, these brass commands cut through like a general's voice amplified 100-fold. The legions didn't just carry swords and shields, they marched with entire squads of cornice and horn players, their instruments so vital that losing one in combat could scatter an entire century into disarray. Half a world away, the Maori turned their very bodies into instruments of war. Before engaging the enemy, warriors would stomp, slap their thighs, and roar in a haka so synchronized it seemed to shake the earth. The whites of their eyes flashed like signal fires, their chants vibrating with ancestral fury. This wasn't mere intimidation, it was neurological warfare. Modern studies show rhythmic chanting increases pain tolerance and releases adrenaline, priming the body for combat. The same primal power that made Polynesian warriors feel invincible also triggered panic in their foes, their lizard brains interpreting the coordinated sound and movement as evidence of superhuman unity. On the wind-swept Mongolian plains, a different sonic strategy unfolded. Throat singers mounted on horseback could produce 2 distinct pitches simultaneously, one a deep, droning foundation, the other a whistling melody cutting through the din of galloping hooves. These otherworldly harmonies allowed commanders to coordinate attacks across miles without radios or flags. A slight shift in overtone might order the left wing to feint retreat while the right prepared to encircle. The Byzantines later adapted this technique, using organ-like hydraulic instruments to relay naval commands across the roar of Aegean storms. What unites these traditions is their ingenious use of music's physics. Low-frequency sounds like drumbeats or didgeridoo blasts travel farther in dense forests, while high-pitched flutes cut through desert winds. The Spartans knew this when they marched to the shrill tones of Orlo's reeds, their relentless rhythm numbing fear as effectively as any armor. Even silence became a weapon. Apache warriors trained to move without rustling a leaf, then strike during the enemy's own song breaks when their guard dropped. Today's militaries still march to these ancient beats. The U.S. Army's reveille and taps descend directly from medieval bugle calls. Scottish bagpipes led troops through foggy battlefields because their drones penetrated mist better than shouts. When Navy SEAL train with rhythmic breathing techniques to steady their aim under fire, they're channeling the same biological hack Greek hoplites discovered. That controlled breath syncs heartbeat to motion, turning chaos into controlled violence. The next time you hear a marching band at a football game, listen closer. Those pounding drums and blaring horns aren't just pomp, they're the living echoes of armies who understood that war isn't just fought with weapons. It's waged in the space between sound and silence, where rhythm becomes resolve, and melody moves men like chess pieces across the bloody board of history. In the moonlit courtyards of Sumer, lovers didn't whisper sweet nothings, they sang them. The world's oldest love poems, etched into clay tablets over 4,000 years ago, weren't meant to be read silently. They were lyrics composed to be performed with lyre accompaniment, their melodies rising and falling like the breath of the infatuated. Imagine a young suitor strumming the golden strings of a bull-headed harp as he sang, "Bridegroom, let me caress you, my precious caress is more savory than honey." His voice trembling not just with nerves, but with the knowledge that in Mesopotamia, music wasn't the backdrop to romance, it was the romance. The very word for love song in Akkadian, Urshima, literally meant to bind the heart, a reminder that melody could do what words alone could not, weave invisible threads between souls. High in the Andes, courtship took on a different rhythm. Quechua sweethearts conversed not with words but through interlocking panpipe melodies, his set of pipes playing one phrase, hers answering like a musical call and response across misty mountain slopes. This wasn't just flirtation, it was acoustic DNA testing. The precision required to sync their breaths and notes revealed compatibility. A pair who couldn't harmonize in music, it was believed, would struggle to harmonize in life. Meanwhile, in monsoon-drenched India, musicians played the raga Megh Malhar under sweltering skies, its cascading notes mimicking thunderclaps. Legend said this melody could summon rain, but it also stirred something more intimate, the storm of longing. When the air grew heavy with humidity and the first notes of the raga swelled, couples would gather on palace balconies, the music giving cover to stolen glances and brushed hands. Medieval Europe transformed this ancient alchemy into high art. Troubadours didn't just sing about love, they weaponized it. A well-composed canso could make a noblewoman's reputation or destroy a rival knight's honor. The 12th century Countess of Dyer took this power further, writing and performing her own chansons, turning the tables by using music to publicly declare her desire. I should like to hold my knight naked in my arms just once. Her bold lyrics, set to delicate VL melodies, proved that courtship songs weren't just male pursuits, they were battlegrounds where women could claim agency through harmony. Fast forward to today and the pattern holds. That mixed tape you made in high school, the carefully sequenced songs were your version of a Sumerian hymn. The swelling strings of a movie's first kiss scene, those are Megh Malhar's descendants, still conducting our heartbeats like ancient conductors. Even dating app algorithms now use musical compatibility scores, proving that after millennia, we still believe what the ancients knew. Love might start with a glance, but it's sealed with a song. What's mesmerizing isn't just the persistence of musical courtship, but the science behind it. When two people sing or play music together, their brains release oxytocin, the same bonding hormone triggered by hugs or childbirth. The Neolithic flute player serenading a potential mate by firelight was essentially jump-starting this chemical reaction, just as a street guitarist today does when crowds sway to his love ballad. Biology confirms what poets always sensed: melody doesn't just express desire, it manufactures it. So the next time you hear a wedding march or catch yourself humming a love song in the shower, remember, you're not just following tradition. You're obeying a primal script written in the oldest language of all, the rhythm that turns strangers into lovers and lovers into duets that echo across centuries. That soft, swaying rhythm you use to rock a baby to sleep, it's older than the pyramids. The world's oldest known lullaby, etched into a Babylonian clay tablet around 2000 BC, carries a plea any parent would recognize. Little one, sleep peacefully, let the moon cradle you. But here's what's astonishing: the melody, reconstructed by musicologists, uses a 6-note scale almost identical to modern lullabies from Iceland to Indonesia. This isn't coincidence, it's biology. Studies show infants worldwide calm fastest to songs in 6/8 time, with a tempo matching the human heart at rest around 60 to 80 beats per minute. The same rocking rhythm that soothed babies in still works in ultrasound wards today, because lullabies aren't just songs, they're sonic swaddling, tapping into a primal understanding that rhythm mimics the safety of the womb. Ancient Greek mothers took this further, weaving protective spells into their lullabies. A surviving fragment from Sparta warns, "Sleep, child, lest the Lamia come," referring to a child-snatching demon, a startling blend of comfort and caution. These weren't just bedtime stories, they were early immune systems, using fear to keep toddlers from wandering toward wells or fires. Meanwhile, in the Andes, Quechua mothers sang to their babies in falsetto, a technique modern midwives recognize as motherese, that high-pitched, vowel-heavy speech proven to boost infant brain development. The fact that these vocal patterns emerged independently across continents suggests something profound. Lullabies are hardwired into human caregiving, as essential as milk or warmth. But music didn't just soothe children, it trained them. Athenian schoolboys learned math through clapping games, their palms keeping time like living metronomes while reciting multiplication tables. A fresco in Akrotiri shows Minoan girls playing a game remarkably similar to pat a cake, their hands meeting in rhythmic patterns that honed coordination and social bonding. In West Africa, the Ga people still practice Atsia clapping dances, where children mimic complex polyrhythms, the same exercises neuroscientists now use to study how rhythm accelerates neural connectivity. Even the familiar ring around the rosy traces back to medieval Europe, where children reenacted plague symptoms through song, turning trauma into a teachable game. What's mesmerizing is how these ancient tools persist in your smartphone's white noise app or the Baby Shark chorus echoing through playgrounds. The Babylonian lullaby's descendant might be a Spotify sleep playlist, but the mechanism remains unchanged: a caregiver's voice, a steady rhythm, and the unshakable human instinct to spin sound into safety. So the next time you absent-mindedly hum to a fussy child, remember, you're not just making noise, you're joining a 4,000-year-old chorus of parents who discovered the oldest truth of all. A song is the first gift we give and the last thing we remember. The camel caravans winding along the Silk Road didn't just carry silks and spices, their saddlebags brimmed with something far more enduring: sound. A Persian barbat lute, tucked beside bolts of blue lapis, might emerge in a Chang'an marketplace transformed, its pear-shaped body now strung with Chinese silk strings. The merchant plucking its cords didn't realize he was conducting an experiment centuries ahead of its time, a fusion of Central Asian drone and pentatonic melody that would one day echo in the plucked pipa of Tang dynasty courts. This wasn't just trade, it was alchemy. Every oasis stop along those dusty routes became a sonic laboratory where Greek lyres borrowed from Indian Veena techniques and Sogdian dancers fused steps with Turkic horsehair fiddle tunes. Down on the Mediterranean coast, Phoenician sailors turned their ships into floating conservatories. A single voyage could carry Egyptian sistrum rhythms to Carthage, blend them with Iberian hand-clapping patterns, and deposit the hybrid in a Sardinian port by moonrise. Their secret: music was the ultimate trade good, lightweight, infinitely adaptable, and more valuable than gold when bartering with suspicious chieftains. A sailor who could play a foreign tune was worth 10 armed guards. Melody opened doors that swords could not. Archaeologists have found bone flutes in shipwrecks off Malta, their finger holes worn smooth by generations of maritime minstrels who understood culture doesn't spread through conquest alone. It hitchhikes on harmony. The genius of this ancient globalization lay in its flexibility. When Buddhist monks carried chant notation along mountain passes to Tibet, the local musicians didn't merely copy, they reinvented. The result: a seismic shift where Sanskrit sutras met Himalayan throat singing, creating the otherworldly juke chants that still vibrate through monastery walls today. Similarly, when African embiras traveled to Java on Arab dhow ships, they didn't just survive. They evolved into the gambang, their metallic twang now underpinning gamelan orchestras. This cultural elasticity explains why music spread faster than religions or political systems. A melody doesn't demand conversion, it invites collaboration. Fast forward to today's Spotify algorithms and the pattern holds. That K-pop hit topping global charts, It's built on the same principles as Silk Road fusion Korean pop hooks, layered over American hip-hop beats with a sprinkle of Japanese kawaii aesthetics. Afrobeat's global takeover, Fela Kuti's Nigerian jazz filtered through London grime and Brooklyn rap, mirrors how Phoenician sailors remixed rhythms across ports. Even the viral TikTok soundbite follows the same ancient blueprint. A snippet of Mongolian throat singing goes global when a Norwegian DJ drops it into a house track. What these ancient traders grasped, and what modern music execs are still learning, is that sonic exchange only works when it flows both ways. The oud didn't replace the Chinese gyukan. It coexisted, cross-pollinated, and birthed new instruments like the Turkish saz. Today's borderless streaming platforms are just digital caravanserais, where a Bedouin drum pattern can inspire a Bollywood composer overnight. The lesson written in those crumbling Silk Road manuscripts and Phoenician ship logs. Humanity's greatest hits were never pure. They were, and still are, remixes. Standing in the very last row of the theater of Epidaurus, even a whisper from the stage reaches your ears with startling clarity. No microphones, no speakers, just 2,400 years of acoustic genius carved into limestone. The Greeks didn't stumble upon this perfection by accident. Every seat, every step, every curve of that semicircle was calculated to bounce sound waves like a stone skipping across water. They understood something we often forget. Music doesn't exist in empty air. It lives in the spaces we build for it. The same architects who balanced columns to please the eye also tuned angles to please the ear, creating spaces where a single lyre note could hang in the air like incense smoke. Cross the Atlantic and you'll find the Maya engineering sound with equal precision but for an entirely different purpose. In the vast ball courts of Chichén Itzá, a hand clap at one end sends back an eerie, distorted echo resembling the cry of the sacred Quetzal bird. This wasn't just clever construction, it was divine theater. When priests chanted during ritual games, the walls transformed their voices into something supernatural, the acoustics convincing worshippers they were hearing the gods themselves. Modern laser scans reveal the exact tilt of those stone surfaces, 23 degrees, proving the Maya manipulated echoes with mathematical precision we're only now deciphering. What's astonishing is how these ancient principles still shape our world. When architects design today's concert halls, they're chasing the same magic the Greeks and Maya mastered. The undulating wood panels of Berlin's Philharmonie, they mimic the stratified seating of Epidaurus, scattering sound evenly without electronic assistance. The parabolic reflectors above stages in Tokyo or New York, direct descendants of the Maya's echoing courts. Even ancient megaliths like Stonehenge reveal secrets. Their standing stones create acoustic shadows that amplify certain frequencies, suggesting rituals there might have included sonic illusions we can barely reconstruct. The real revelation isn't just that these cultures built for sound, it's why they did. In Greece, clear acoustics were democracy in action, ensuring even the poorest citizen in the cheapest seat could hear Sophocles' verses. For the Maya, distorted echoes were sacred technology, blurring the line between human and divine. Compare that to modern stadiums where half the audience relies on jumbo screens and ear-splitting speakers, and you start to wonder, in perfecting amplification, have we lost the art of listening? Perhaps that's why acousticians still pilgrimage to these ancient sites, tuning forks in hand. They've discovered that the Epidaurus Theater's limestone seats filter out low-frequency crowd noise while boosting performers' high frequencies, an ancient noise-canceling algorithm. They've measured how Mayan ballcourt echoes delay sound precisely 43 milliseconds, the exact timing needed to create auditory hallucinations. These weren't accidents, they were breakthroughs in a science we're only beginning to appreciate. So the next time you walk into a concert venue, look beyond the lights and the crowd. That space you're standing in, it's the latest chapter in an unbroken story, one that began when someone first realized walls could sing and stones could remember. For the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, a song wasn't just a melody, it was a living map. These intricate song lines, passed down for over 60,000 years, encoded the contours of the land in their rhythms and intervals. A rising note might signal a hill, a staccato passage a patch of rocky terrain, while the spaces between verses marked the distance to the next waterhole. Travelers could navigate hundreds of miles through unfamiliar wilderness simply by singing the correct sequence, their voices aligning with the Earth's own frequencies. Modern audio analysis reveals something astonishing. These song lines often match the actual resonant frequencies of the landscapes they describe. When sung at Uluru, for example, certain notes cause the red sandstone to vibrate perceptibly, proof that these weren't just metaphors, but a sophisticated acoustic geography. Meanwhile, in the icy fjords of Scandinavia, Norse skalds composed verses where the crash of waves became percussion and the howl of winter winds shaped meter. Their sagas didn't just describe nature, they channeled it. A line like, "The sea's cold fingers strummed the ship's ropes," wasn't poetic license, it was precise observation. Viking musicians crafted lyre horns from birchwood, their curved shapes designed to amplify the harmonics of open water. Archaeologists have found these instruments positioned near cliff edges, suggesting they were played to echo across bays, a primitive sonar system that helped fishermen locate herring shoals by how sound bounced off them. In the bamboo forests of Japan, the shakuhachi flute became a bridge between human creativity and natural forces. Master players spent years learning to mimic not just bird calls, but the subtle whispers of leaves and the gurgle of mountain streams. The flute's very construction honored this connection, each instrument carved from the root end of bamboo, where the plant's energy was most concentrated. Commuso monks played suizan, blowing meditation pieces that mirrored the irregular rhythms of rainfall, believing this alignment could induce enlightenment. Modern bioacoustics confirms their intuition. When shakuhachi music matches the fractal patterns of natural sounds, listeners' brainwaves shift into relaxed alpha states. This ancient sonic wisdom is experiencing a revival. Icelandic composer Björk's biophilia project translates tectonic plate movements into harp glissandos, while Australian artists embed sensors in trees to convert photosynthesis patterns into ambient drones. In Canada's Banff National Park, a soundscape ecology team records disappearing natural acoustics. From the crackle of melting glaciers to the altered songs of climate-stressed birds, preserving them as musical archives. Even the humpback whale's song, once heard only by sailors, now influences electronic music through hydrophone recordings. What connects these traditions across time and space is a radical idea. Music isn't something we impose on nature, but a conversation with it. When a Maori Putatara shell trumpet mimics a bird's cry to summon rain, or a Tuvan throat singer's overtones mirror wind through grass, they're participating in an exchange far older than human language. The latest field recordings from the Amazon rainforest reveal trees communicating via ultrasonic clicks, proof that our musical roots might stretch even deeper than we imagined. Perhaps the first human melody wasn't an invention at all, but a response, an attempt to answer the Earth's own enduring song. In the Forbidden City's shadow, the number of bronze bells hanging from a nobleman's frame told his status without a single word. An emperor's orchestra might boast 64 perfectly tuned Bayanjong bells, each cast with exacting precision to resonate at pitches that aligned with Confucian cosmology. A provincial governor, perhaps 16, a minor official, 4. This wasn't just musical preference, it was sonic law. The Zhou dynasty's system of rites and music decreed that exceeding one's allotted instruments was punishable by death, because in ancient China, harmony wasn't just art, it was the auditory architecture of power. The deepest bells, vibrating at frequencies that seemed to shake the earth itself, were reserved for the Son of Heaven alone, a physical reminder that some melodies were too potent for common ears. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, Aztec nobility studied at the Comicac elite academies where music was warfare by other means. Young aristocrats mastered the Teponaztli drum's complex codes, rhythms that could summon rain or signal troop movements, while commoners learned simpler folk tunes in the Tolpachkali schools. The difference wasn't just skill, it was access to the divine. Only nobles could play the conch shell trumpet during sacrifices, its eerie wail believed to carry messages to Tlaloc's stormy realm. A merchant's son might marry into nobility if he composed a particularly brilliant hymn to Huitzilopochtli, but the path was narrow as a flute's breath hole. Rome presented a starker paradox. Enslaved musicians from Greece and Syria provided the soundtrack to lavish patrician banquets, their fingers dancing over lyre strings while guests reclined on couches. Yet the same hands that conjured beauty were legally forbidden from creating original compositions. Innovation was a privilege reserved for free citizens. Except when it wasn't, the poet Horace, son of a freed slave, rose to imperial favor by setting his verses to music, proving melody could sometimes grease the wheels of social ascent. This ancient tug-of-war between exclusion and opportunity still plays out in today's music industry. A street busker's viral YouTube cover might land them a label deal, echoing how medieval minstrels could be knighted for exceptional service. Yet access to elite training, vintage instruments, or industry connections often follows the same old hierarchies. Just swap imperial courts for Ivy League conservatories. When a K-pop trainee spends years in a corporate dungeon perfecting every note, they're walking the same tightrope as Renaissance court musicians who balanced artistic freedom against noble patrons' whims. What's revealing is how these ancient systems acknowledged music's dual nature, a force powerful enough to uphold empires, yet too volatile to be fully contained. The very same Chinese emperors who restricted bell ownership also maintained the music bureau, scouting peasant prodigies who might please the imperial ear. Aztec commoners barred from sacred instruments could still rise through military bands, their marching songs becoming stepping stones to prestige. Even Rome's enslaved virtuosos sometimes earned enough to buy their freedom, one perfect cadence at a time. The lesson written in these scrolls and codices isn't just about oppression, it's about music's stubborn refusal to respect boundaries. A melody might be composed under duress, but once released into the air, it belongs to whoever hears it. That tension between who gets to make music and who gets to move to it still thrums beneath every streaming chart and Grammy speech today. Perhaps because sound, unlike stone or silk, can't be hoarded in vaults. It slips through palace gates on the breeze, finding ears far beyond those deemed worthy to listen. In the shadow of Mesopotamia's ziggurats, priestesses like Enheduanna didn't just perform sacred music, they composed it. The world's first named author, this Sumerian high priestess wrote hymns so powerful they were still being copied centuries after her death. Her songs to the goddess Inanna weren't mere prayers, they were theological manifestos, using complex meter and metaphor to assert female divinity in a patriarchal world. Meanwhile, across the Mediterranean in classical Athens, women of status were barred from public performances, their musical expression confined to the shadows of courtyards and women's quarters. A respectable Athenian matron might play the lyre at private symposia, but never with the freedom of male musicians who competed at Dionysian festivals. This stark contrast reveals music's ancient duality, a domain where gender lines could be both fiercely guarded and surprisingly fluid. Then there's Sappho, the lyric rebel of Lesbos, whose verses pulsed with desire so bold they made Plato call her the 10th muse. Strumming her barbitos at a time when women's voices were meant to be silent, she turned love between women into high art. The fragments that survive, You Burn Me, still scorch the page 2,600 years later. Her very existence proves that even in restrictive societies, music could be a crowbar prying open spaces for forbidden voices. Equally striking were Egypt's Shemite ensembles, all-female musical troupes who performed at temples and palaces. Tomb paintings show them leading processions with framed drums and sistrums, their authority so unquestioned that male musicians often appear as supporting players. What's fascinating is how these contradictions played out across cultures. In Rome, Vestal virgins sang sacred chants no man could utter, while Etruscan women performed publicly alongside men, a scandal to their Roman neighbors. India's Devadasi's temple dancers composed ecstatic poetry, yet faced social ostracism. This push and pull between restriction and liberation mirrors today's music industry struggles, from the glass ceiling of classical conducting to the coded rebellion of female rap verses. The deeper truth lies in music's unique ability to hold opposites in tension. A Mesopotamian priestess's hymn could reinforce state power while secretly channeling feminist defiance. A Greek woman's private lullaby might contain covert protests against her confinement. Even the instruments themselves carried gendered meanings. The Aulos flute, associated with Dionysian abandon, was considered too erotic for respectable women, while the lyre symbolized domestic virtue. These ancient patterns still reverberate in modern debates about who gets to make music and on what terms. When a K-pop agency trains its female idols in demure sweetness while male groups explore edgier concepts, or when classical orchestras finally confront their long exclusion of women composers, they're wrestling with divides as old as Enheduanna's hymns. The lesson from antiquity is clear. Music never just reflects society's rules, it also holds the tools to dismantle them, one defiant note at a time. The Celtic bard tuning his harp by firelight wasn't just preparing to sing, he was sharpening his mind like a blade. With no written scores to rely on, these master storytellers wove epic tales in real time, stitching together familiar motifs with fresh twists tailored to their audience's gasps or murmurs. A cheer for the hero's bravery might inspire an extra verse about his childhood, while a yawn from the back benches could trigger a sudden plot twist involving sea monsters or stolen treasure. This wasn't chaos, it was high-wire artistry, where every plucked string and syllable balanced tradition with spontaneity. The same bard who performed the Tain Bo Cuelge one night might deliver a radically different version the next, not because he forgot, but because the story lived in his bones, ready to reshape itself like molten gold. Meanwhile, under the baobab trees of Mali, a griot's voice rose and fell with the rhythm of his listeners' breathing. These West African historians didn't merely recite genealogies. They read the room like jazz musicians, sensing when to stretch a phrase or drop into silence. A griot recounting Sundiota's empire might emphasize military strategy for warriors, then pivot to romantic subplots for newlyweds in the crowd. The chora's 21 strings provided endless harmonic possibilities, allowing the musician to underscore sorrow with minor pentatonic runs or ignite celebration with cascading arpeggios. What seemed like improvisation was actually deep listening, a call and response with history itself, where the past remained alive precisely because it was never frozen in place. This fluidity stood in stark contrast to the rigid compositions of imperial courts. while Chinese musicians faced execution for deviating from ancient bell chime rituals, and Byzantine chanters risked excommunication for altering a single sacred note, folk traditions thrived on mutation. A Welsh lullaby might cross the Irish Sea and return with new lyrics about local landmarks. A Gambian work song could absorb Arabic melodic flourishes from caravan traders without losing its essence. Like rivers carving ever-shifting paths through bedrock, these melodies proved that durability didn't require rigidity. Sometimes survival meant bending. Fast forward to a New Orleans jazz club or a Brooklyn cipher, and you'll witness the same ancient alchemy. When a saxophonist deconstructs giant steps or an MC freestyles over a beat, they're channeling the bard's instinct to reinvent in real time. Even classical music, once the bastion of sheet-bound precision, now embraces interpretations where no two performances match, a concept that would have horrified 18th-century court composers but made perfect sense to Homeric poets. What these traditions share is a radical faith in the moment. No algorithm can predict the griot's next melodic turn. No app can notate the bard's spontaneous couplets. In an age of auto-tune and quantization, that human unpredictability remains music's greatest magic, proof that the truest notes aren't written down, but breathed alive between performer and listener, just as they were when harp strings first hummed beneath smoky thatch roofs and starlit savannas. Long before pen met parchment, memory lived in melody. The ancient Greeks didn't just associate Mnemosyne, goddess of memory, with the muses by accident. They understood that rhythm and rhyme were the original hard drives. Picture an Irish cinch perched on a wooden stool, weaving a clan's entire lineage into a lilting ballad. A single verse might stretch back 12 generations, each name anchored to a specific melodic phrase. Over in India, Vedic priests still chant 3,000-year-old scriptures with flawless accuracy, not because of photographic memory, but because the rising and falling pitches act as sonic breadcrumbs for the mind. This wasn't merely tradition, it was neuroscience in action. Modern studies reveal that when information is set to music, the brain engages both the hippocampus for memory and the nucleus accumbens for pleasure, creating a dual lock storage system far more durable than rote memorization. What's startling is how this ancient hack shapes our lives today. That jingle you can't shake after hearing it once in 1987. Its proof melody bypasses rational filters to nestle deep in the subconscious, a trick Mesopotamian beer sellers used when they composed catchy tunes about their ale's quality. The same neural pathways that helped Homer recite the Odyssey now make toddlers master the alphabet through song, or doctors recall complex anatomy with musical mnemonics. Even traumatic memories encoded in melody persist with eerie clarity. Holocaust survivors have recounted how camp songs remained etched in their minds decades later, while mundane details faded. But music's grip on memory isn't just about retention, it's about time travel. When a Spanish grandmother hums a lullaby her own mother sang, she's not just recalling words. Her brain reactivates the original sensory context, the warmth of a childhood hearth, the scent of olive wood smoke. MRI scans show nostalgic music lights up the medial prefrontal cortex, the brain's timekeeper, more powerfully than photographs or smells. This explains why archaeologists find bone flutes buried with the dead across cultures. Our ancestors knew melodies could carry identities into the afterlife when grave goods crumbled to dust. Nowhere is this more poignant than in endangered languages. The last speakers of Tasmania's Palawakani preserved their tongue not through dictionaries, but in song cycles describing star navigation and seasonal harvests. Similarly, the whistled language of La Gomera, Silbo, survives because its intricate melodies were used to shout across valleys, a linguistic lifeline now studied by emergency planners for disaster communication. These aren't quaint traditions, they're living proof that when speech fails, song endures. The dark side of this power, earworms weaponized. From fascist rally chants to cult indoctrination hymns, history shows repetitive melodies can implant ideologies as easily as grocery lists. Yet there's hope in how Ukrainian folk songs, banned under Soviet rule, kept national identity alive in kitchens for 70 years, bursting back into public squares with independence. This duality, music as both manipulator and liberator, reveals why every empire from Rome to Britain tried to control it. Melodies might fade from the air, but once they take root in memory, they're nearly impossible to erase. So the next time a childhood song ambushes you with unexpected tears or joy, know this: you're not just remembering, you're rewinding an ancient tape, one that plays back not just sounds, but the very texture of your past. Pythagoras didn't just hear music, he heard the universe singing. Staring at the night sky in ancient Croton, the philosopher-mathematician became convinced that the planets moved in perfect mathematical ratios, their orbits humming intervals we now recognize as musical octaves, fifths, and fourths. To him, Mercury's rapid orbit wasn't just a celestial path, it was a high C, while Saturn's sluggish dance rang out as a deep, resonant F. This concept of musica universalis, the music of the spheres, wasn't poetic metaphor. It was a scientific hypothesis, one that bridged the gap between math and mysticism, suggesting the cosmos operated on the same harmonic principles as a finely tuned lyre. Centuries later and an ocean away, Maya astronomers were reaching eerily similar conclusions. Their observatories doubled as acoustic chambers, where the timing of Venus's appearances dictated the rhythms of sacred drums. A surviving codex reveals how they matched the planet's 584-day cycle to a 13-beat musical phrase, creating a celestial metronome that governed everything from planting seasons to royal coronations. When Venus rose as the morning star, priests played conch shells in a specific pentatonic scale believed to mirror its ethereal vibrations. This wasn't superstition, it was precision acoustics. Modern researchers have found that the Pyramid of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza produces chirping echoes at frequencies matching the Maya's Venus-inspired scales, proving their architecture literally resonated with the heavens. Fast forward to the Renaissance, and Johannes Kepler took Pythagoras' idea to staggering new heights. Obsessed with proving the harmony of the spheres, he spent years calculating planetary orbits, only to discover they didn't fit neat Pythagorean ratios. Instead of abandoning the theory, he composed a radical new cosmic symphony, one where Mercury screeched like a falsetto, Jupiter and Saturn lumbered in basso profundo, and Earth sang a melancholy mi-fa interval, which he interpreted as the syllable for misery in medieval solfege. Kepler's calculations were off by modern standards, but his intuition was uncanny. We now know planets do emit electromagnetic vibrations, which NASA Voyager probes captured as eerie whistles and hums. Today, this ancient dialogue between astronomy and music thrives in unexpected ways. When composer Gustav Holst scored the planets in 1914, he channeled astrological archetypes: Mars as a pounding march of war, Neptune as an elusive, dissolving haze. But the real breakthrough came in 2019, when scientists at MIT and NASA began sonifying space data. Black holes don't just swallow light, they vibrate at frequencies 57 octaves below middle C, which researchers transposed into audible tones. The result, a deep, groaning B-flat that's been sounding for 2 billion years. Similarly, the pulsar at the heart of the Crab Nebula beats with a rhythm so precise. It's been called the universe's metronome. Its pulses align perfectly with the Dies Irae, the medieval chant about Judgment Day. What connects Pythagoras' lyre to a black hole's drone is more than curiosity, it's a fundamental truth about how humans seek meaning. Faced with the vast silence of space, we've always reached for music to translate the incomprehensible into something that moves us. Whether it's a Maya priest blowing a Venus-aligned conch or a modern astrophysicist turning gamma rays into a string quartet, the impulse remains the same: to hear the cosmos not as cold void, but as a chorus. And perhaps that's the most astonishing revelation of all, that in trying to listen to the universe, we've been composing a love song to it all along. The crack of a leather whip echoed across the Spartan valley, each strike timed precisely to the pounding of war drums. At the altar of Artemis Orthia, teenage boys endured brutal floggings without flinching, their teeth gritted to the rhythm, a ritual believed to forge unbreakable warriors through pain set to music. This wasn't mere cruelty, it was acoustic conditioning. The drumbeat served a dual purpose. Their steady cadence helped the youths dissociate from agony, while the public spectacle synchronized the entire community's idea of discipline. Even the spectators' chants played a role. Research now shows group singing releases endorphins that elevate pain thresholds, suggesting these festivals chemically bonded participants through shared suffering. Far to the east, the Qin dynasty wielded sound as a weapon of a different kind. Convicted criminals were paraded through streets to the deafening clang of out-of-tune bronze gongs, their dissonance deliberately calculated to maximize shame. Chinese philosophers understood what modern psychologists confirm: chaotic noise triggers primal stress responses, flooding the body with cortisol. By stripping punishment of any musicality, the Qin turned sound into psychological torture, a practice chillingly echoed in today's use of relentless pop music as an interrogation tactic. Yet the same cultures that weaponized rhythm also revered its unifying power. Those Spartan drummers who accompanied floggings also led armies into battle, their beats transforming individual soldiers into a single, unstoppable organism. The Qin emperors, while brutalizing criminals with noise, commissioned vast orchestras to perform perfectly harmonized state rituals, proof they understood music's dual nature as both social glue and social control. This ancient dichotomy reverberates through modern life. National anthems stir patriotic fervor at Olympic podiums, yet the same melodies become tools of coercion when played at mandatory rallies. Church bells that once comforted villagers now mark territorial dominance in religious conflicts. Even protest chants follow this pattern. The same call and response that empowered civil rights marchers in Selma was used by fascist youth groups in 20th century Europe. What the Spartans and Qin emperors grasped, and what we're still grappling with, is that music's power lies in its neutrality. A drumbeat can fortify a soldier or break a prisoner. A hymn can uplift a congregation or suppress dissent. The difference isn't in the notes themselves, but in who controls the rhythm and who gets to dance. Perhaps that's why authoritarian regimes still fear musicians more than politicians, and why lullabies survive revolutions. Sound may be the most potent weapon humans ever invented, precisely because it can wound or heal without ever leaving a visible scar. In the austere meditation halls of Kyoto's Zen temples, the absence of sound was never empty, it was alive. Monks practicing suizen, or blowing meditation, would play a single note on their bamboo flutes, then let it dissolve into silence until the next breath. These pauses weren't gaps in the music, they were the music teaching a radical lesson, that true listening begins where sound ends. The spaces between notes held as much meaning as the notes themselves, a philosophy captured in the Japanese concept of ma, the sacred interval that gives form to both art and existence. A 16th century scroll from Rionjai Temple illustrates this perfectly. A flute score with just 3 notes spaced minutes apart, the rest of the page blank, as if to say, the silence is the song. Meanwhile, under the blistering sun of the Sahara, Tuareg nomas measured time not by clocks, but by the distant cry of a desert fox or the creak of a camel's harness. Their musical tradition, a sak, revered scarcity, a lone voice singing into the wind. The rasp of a goat-hide drum struck once every few breaths. In a landscape where water was life, the drip-drip of a rare oasis spring became percussion, its irregular rhythm more precious than any composed melody. Anthropologists recording these soundscapes in the 1970s noticed something extraordinary. The nomads' hearing was so finely tuned they could identify individual grains of sand shifting in the wind, a skill honed by lifetimes of attending to whispers. This ancient relationship with quiet stands in stark contrast to our modern cacophony, where a medieval monk might spend years learning to play just one note with perfect presence. We now drown in playlists algorithmically designed to eliminate even microseconds of silence. Studies show the average urban environment today has over 90 decibels of constant noise, the equivalent of standing near a motorcycle revving non-stop. Yet buried in our biology remains the same primal sensitivity that let a Zen master hear snow falling on temple roofs or a Bedouin tracker detect water underground. Neurologists call this the auditory dark mode, a state where the brain's parahippocampal gyrus becomes hyper-receptive to subtle sounds, precisely the mode ancient cultures cultivated intentionally. The irony, some of history's most powerful musical moments harnessed this wisdom. Beethoven, composing his Ninth Symphony while deaf, wrote rests so profound they feel like portals to eternity. John Cage's 4:33, 4.5 minutes of silence, revealed how every cough, rustle, and heartbeat becomes music when we truly listen. Even the blues, born in Mississippi's cotton fields, thrived on the tension between bent notes and the aching space around them. Perhaps this is why recordings of ancient soundscapes from Himalayan singing bowls to Amazonian rainforests have become therapeutic tools today. They don't just soothe, they reteach an old skill, how to hear absence as presence, how to let silence sculpt sound into meaning. The next time you pause your playlist or step outside at dawn, try it. Listen not just to what's there, but to what isn't. In that space, you might hear what desert nomads and Zen monks knew all along, that the most profound melodies are the ones the world whispers when we stop playing. In the flickering torchlight of a Viking mead hall, the skald's voice rose like smoke between the rafters, his verses weaving tales of gods and battles as warriors tore into roasted boar. But this wasn't just dinner theater, it was culinary science. The skalds knew something modern researchers have since quantified. Fast, rhythmic poetry increased saliva production, priming the gut for rich meats and honeyed drinks. Meanwhile, in the marble halls of China's Han Dynasty, imperial musicians followed strict gastronomic scores. Bamboo flutes trilled over platters of delicate dumplings, their staccato notes mimicking the quick bites of appetizers, while deep bronze bells resonated during slow-cooked braises, their vibrations subtly guiding guests to chew methodically. These weren't arbitrary choices. Ancient physicians from Rome to Kyoto documented how high-pitched instruments stimulated appetite, while low drones eased digestion, a fact anyone who's ever unwound to jazz after dessert understands instinctively. The synergy between sound and taste runs deeper than mere ambience. When archaeologists reconstructed a Mesopotamian banquet from cuneiform recipes and lyre fragments, they discovered something astonishing. The fatty lamb stews were intentionally paired with instruments producing rich overtones, which chemically enhanced umami perception on the tongue. Similarly, Aztec cocoa ceremonies always included conch shell trumpets, not for pageantry, but because their brassy frequencies amplified the bitterness of chocolate, making it seem more luxurious. This wasn't just pairing, it was perceptual alchemy where sound waves physically altered flavor molecules. Fast forward to today's Michelin-starred restaurants, and the ancient playbook remains shockingly relevant. That molecular gastronomy dish served with headphones playing ocean waves. It's the direct descendant of Tang Dynasty tea masters who matched specific water-boiling sounds to different tea varieties. The playlist at your neighborhood bistro, cycling from upbeat salsa during happy hour to mellow bossa nova by dessert. That's Han Dynasty sequencing reborn. Even the TikTok trend of crunchy food videos taps into our Neolithic wiring. The crisp frequencies of biting into fried foods trigger the same primal satisfaction our ancestors felt hearing successful hunts or harvests. What these traditions share is a visceral understanding that eating is never just about sustenance. The clink of chopsticks on porcelain, the sizzle of meat on hot stones, the communal singing that follows a feast, these sounds transform meals into memories. Modern science confirms what ancient cultures practiced. Diners rate the same wine as 15% more flavorful when accompanied by music in a matching key, and bread actually tastes saltier when paired with high-pitched tones. So the next time you catch yourself swaying to cafe music while sipping coffee, know this: you're not just hearing background noise, you're tasting with your ears, partaking in a sensory symphony composed millennia ago, where every note still shapes what reaches your lips. The wail of an Egyptian mourner wasn't just grief unleashed, it was a cosmic roadmap. When priests chanted the songs of the dead over a linen-wrapped body, they believed each syllable helped navigate the soul through Juat's treacherous underworld. The melodies followed strict patterns, rising at phrases about ascending to the field of reeds, dipping low for verses describing serpent-filled caverns. Even the instruments were chosen for their symbolic resonance. Bronze sistrums rattled to scare away demons, while flutes imitated the wind that would carry the deceased's name into eternity. This wasn't mere ceremony, it was sonic architecture, building a bridge between worlds with vibration as mortar. High in the Himalayas, Tibetan monks approached death's threshold differently. The deep, resonant hum of singing bowls wasn't just accompaniment to prayers, it was physics in service of spirituality. When placed on a dying person's chest, the bowl's vibrations traveled through bone and tissue at frequencies shown by modern studies to reduce anxiety and pain perception. The monks understood something science now confirms: certain tones can synchronize brain waves, easing the transition from consciousness to whatever lies beyond. The bowl's overtones, layered like ripples in a pond, mirrored the Buddhist concept of impermanence, each note fading as gracefully as a last breath. Then there were the Irish bean céhóintear, the keening women who turned grief into a communal art form. Standing barefoot by fresh graves, they wove improvised laments so visceral, 19th century doctors reported bystanders fainting from the emotional intensity. Their cries followed ancient rhythmic structures: three sobs, a held note, a guttural release patterns that neurologists now link to the brain's natural processing of trauma. Unlike the polished elegies of Victorian England, these raw vocalizations honored sorrow's jagged edges, proving that mourning could be both chaotic and profoundly beautiful. What unites these traditions isn't just their relationship to death, but their insistence on making loss audible. The Yoruba of Nigeria still dress departed children in colorful garments and bury them with pottery whistles so their playful spirits might linger in the wind's song. In rural Romania, grave markers are often hollowed into panpipes, letting rainfall play melodies for the dead. These practices recognize a truth modern psychology echoes: silence amplifies sorrow, while shared sound creates a container for it. Today's memorial playlists and bagpipe processions are distant echoes of these ancient soundtracks for passage. When a widow requests "Over the Rainbow" at her spouse's funeral or a veteran's coffin is carried to taps, they're participating in a ritual as old as civilization itself, one that acknowledges death may take the body, but music keeps the memory vibrating in the air, in the ears, in the heart. The playlists change, the instruments evolve, but the need remains to let grief have its melody, and in doing so, remind the living that even the sharpest pain can find resonance in shared song. The rhythmic click-clack of an Andean weaver's loom wasn't just background noise, it was the heartbeat of creation itself. High in the Andes, Quechua women still weave intricate textiles while singing huenos, their melodies syncing perfectly with the shuttle's movement. Each pull of the thread corresponds to a syllable in the song, turning the act of weaving into a living musical score. The patterns emerging on the fabric aren't just designs, they're frozen music, the warp and weft mirroring the rise and fall of the singer's voice. Anthropologists have found that these textile motifs often match the rhythmic structure of the song's note for note, as if the cloth itself is humming a tune only the weaver can hear. Across the ocean, Viking sailmakers worked to a different beat. The process of treating and stitching massive woolen sails required coordinated labor, so they sang sea shanties timed to the punching of needles and the pulling of ropes. The songs weren't just for morale, they ensured uniformity in stitch length, with each verse acting as a metronome for precision. A surviving Norse saga describes how a poorly sung shanty could result in a sail that breathed unevenly, catching wind in dangerous ways. This wasn't superstition, it was acoustical engineering. The right rhythm meant the difference between a sail that withstood a gale and one that shredded mid-voyage. This marriage of craft and cadence echoes through history. In West Africa, the Yoruba wove proverbs into cloth while chanting corresponding rhythms, embedding wisdom into both fabric and song. Japanese kimono makers used the repetitive sound of the tataki mallet beating silk threads to mark time, creating a meditative workflow that doubled as quality control. Any variation in the hammer's rhythm signaled a flaw in the material. Even the Industrial Revolution couldn't sever this bond. Early textile mills may have replaced human voices with steam whistles, but the looms still clattered in strict time, their mechanical clicks a distant cousin to the Andean weaver's song. Today, the legacy of this tactile harmony lives in unexpected places. The steady whir of a modern sewing machine follows the same principle as those Viking work songs, its needle dancing to an internal rhythm that keeps stitches even. Bakers kneading dough often fall into unconscious rhythmic patterns, their hands moving like conductors leading an orchestra of gluten strands. Even the repetitive taps of a keyboard echo this ancient synergy. Our fingers still seek rhythm, turning mundane tasks into covert compositions. What's mesmerizing is how these traditions reveal a universal truth. The human brain craves rhythm not just in music, but in motion. Neuroscientists call this entrainment, where our movements naturally sync with auditory patterns. When a weaver's hands match her song, or a sailor's stitches align with a shanty, they're tapping into a primal wiring that blurs the line between labor and art. So the next time you find yourself humming while folding laundry or tapping your foot as you type, remember, you're not just passing time. You're joining a chorus of creators who have always known that the most beautiful work happens when hands and voice move as one. In the moonlit courtyards of ancient India, the god Krishna lifted his bamboo flute to his lips, and cobras swayed from their baskets not from fear but fascination. This enduring image captures a truth science is only beginning to grasp, that music's power crosses species lines with ease. Greek shepherds knew it too, playing sweet melodies on their syrinx pipes to ease their flocks into restful huddles as wolves howled in distant hills. The instruments themselves often came from the animal world: bone whistles carved from deer femurs, drums stretched with goat hide, conch shells transformed into trumpets, each carrying echoes of interspecies dialogue. Modern researchers have uncovered startling evidence that these ancient practices were more than folklore. Humpback whales compose complex songs with repeating themes that evolve over seasons, following musical structures eerily similar to human symphonies. Nightingales arrange their melodies using variations of rhythm and pitch that mirror classical sonata form, while lyrebirds in Australia flawlessly mimic chainsaws and camera shutters alongside their own intricate compositions. What's astonishing isn't just their mimicry, but their creativity. Wild parrots have been observed improvising new tunes by combining snippets of other birds' calls, essentially remixing their sound environment in real time. This musical kinship between species runs deeper than performance. When biologists played classical guitar to spider colonies, the arachnids built more symmetrical webs under Bach's orderly harmonies but erratic ones when exposed to dissonant avant-garde pieces. Dairy farmers from Finland to Turkey have long sung specific lullabies to cows at milking time, a tradition now validated by studies showing certain tempos increase prolactin levels in bovine milk. Even plants seem responsive. Rice paddies in Japan exposed to traditional gagaku court music yielded harvests 15% larger than control groups, suggesting vibrational patterns may stimulate growth at cellular levels. The most poignant intersections occur in cross-species collaboration. An elephant named Shirley, rescued from a circus, formed an unexpected bond with a pianist at her sanctuary. When he played Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, she'd rumble along in perfect pitch, her infrasound vibrations felt rather than heard. Similarly, a beluga whale named Nock learned to mimic human speech rhythms so accurately that Navy researchers initially thought they were hearing a distant radio broadcast. These moments reveal music not as a human invention, but as a universal language waiting to be discovered, one that predates our species by millions of years. From wolves harmonizing across mountain ranges to chimpanzees drumming on hollow logs in ritualistic patterns, the animal kingdom resounds with proof that melody and rhythm are nature's oldest connectors. Perhaps that's why a solitary flute still calms a cobra today, just as it did in Krishna's time, not through magic, but through the shared biology of vibration that ties all beating hearts together in one vast, singing web of life. Aristotle wasn't just philosophizing when he described the Lydian mode as deep purple and the Phrygian as fiery red. He was tapping into a phenomenon that still baffles and delights scientists today. In ancient China, court musicians tuned their bronze bells to correspond with the 5 elements, assigning the note gong to earth yellow, shang to metal white, and ju to wood blue-green. These weren't arbitrary choices. For the estimated 4% of humans with synesthesia, sound does trigger color, a neurological crossover where hearing a violin might paint the air saffron or a thunderous drumbeat could flash obsidian across the mind's eye. The composer Olivier Messiaen, who saw chords as swirling color fields, once wrote an entire symphony based on the hues he perceived in different harmonies, proof that this sensory blending isn't just poetic license, but a profound rewiring of perception. The ancient Greeks took this further with their chroma theory, believing musical scales could purify bodily humors by bathing listeners in specific chromatic vibrations. A feverish patient might be prescribed melodies in the cool Hypodorian mode, imagined as silvery blue, while someone lethargic would receive energizing Phrygian tones visualized as crimson. Modern labs have since discovered something astonishing. Even non-synesthetes show measurable brain responses when matching high-pitched sounds to bright colors and low tones to darker hues, a universal cross-sensory instinct that may explain why minor keys feel shadowy and major ones sunlit. Fast forward to today's immersive concert experiences, and you'll witness this ancient dialogue between ear and eye reborn with laser precision. When Beyoncé's Lemonade paired grief-stricken ballads with Southern Gothic visuals drenched in indigo and gold, or when Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon synced prism imagery with psychedelic solos, they were fulfilling a primal human need to see music. Even streaming platforms now offer colorizer algorithms that convert playlists into shifting palettes, a digital echo of those Chinese elemental scales. What's revelatory is how these traditions persist beyond art. Hospitals use color sound therapy to reduce post-op pain, matching turquoise light to calming ocean wave recordings. Airports employ chromatic soundscapes to guide travelers, warm amber tones for departures, cool aqua chimes for arrivals. The lesson written in Aristotle's notebooks and etched into Ming Dynasty musical treatises remains true. Music was never solitary. It's a bridge between senses, a secret language where a single note can taste like honey, smell like rain, or glow like embers in the dark. High in the Andes, Inca priests didn't just count days, they sang them into existence. Their quipu, intricate knotted chords, served as both calendar and musical notation, with each knot representing a ceremonial chant tied to agricultural cycles. During the winter solstice, priests would unfurl these chords like sheet music, singing the sun back from its wandering path with melodies that mirrored the knot patterns. The rhythm of planting, harvesting, and festivals wasn't dictated by silent numbers, but by vocalized mathematics, where a song about maize growth might last precisely as long as the crop's germination period. Modern archaeologists have discovered something extraordinary. The spacing between knots often corresponds to intervals found in traditional Quechua harvest songs, suggesting these chords were literally woven with time's melody. Meanwhile, in Babylon's ziggurat observatories, astronomer priests tracked Venus's movements not with dry equations, but through Enuma Anu Enlil, a series of hymns where each musical phrase marked planetary positions. A rising melodic line might signify Jupiter's appearance, while a descending scale mirrored Mercury's retreat. These weren't poetic metaphors, they were mnemonic tools. By setting celestial patterns to music, the Babylonians could predict eclipses centuries in advance, their oral tradition preserving accuracy that rivaled written records. A surviving tablet from Uruk details how the Kolu priests tuned their harps to specific modes during lunar months, creating an acoustic almanac where harmony and heavenly motion were inseparable. This fusion of sound and scheduling echoes through history. Medieval European monks structured their days around the canonical hours, each prayer service timed by specific chants. The pre-dawn matins in somber tones, the midday sextin bright ascending scales. Sailors navigated by sea shanties whose verses corresponded to half-hourglass turns, turning labor into a living clock. Even the rhythmic pounding of Japanese mokujo drums during Buddhist ceremonies served a dual purpose. Their wooden resonance marked meditation intervals, while the hollow fish-shaped instruments symbolized time's elusive flow. What's revelatory is how these ancient practices anticipated modern science. Circadian rhythm researchers now confirm that workers exposed to natural acoustic cycles, birdsong at dawn, insect choruses at dusk, maintain better sleep patterns than those relying on digital alarms. Hospitals use harp music synced to respiratory rates to calm ICU patients, while factories increase productivity by matching background music to optimal workflow tempos. Your smartphone's alarm tone might be a far cry from Inca solstice chants, but the principle remains identical. Sound doesn't just measure time, it shapes our experience of it. The next time you hum absent-mindedly while waiting for coffee to brew or tap your foot to a metronome-like pop song, remember, you're not just passing minutes. You're participating in humanity's oldest timekeeping technology, one that turns the abstract march of seconds into something you can feel in your bones and sing with your breath. From lullabies to battle cries, music in ancient life pulsed through every moment like a second heartbeat. It wasn't just decoration, it was the scaffolding of civilization, the hidden code of survival. Those haunting bone flutes and thunderous war drums weren't creating background noise. They were composing the very blueprint of human experience. Think about it. When a mother in Mesopotamia hummed to her child, she wasn't just soothing them, she was passing down a sonic shield against the dark. When Roman legions marched to brass horns, they weren't just keeping time, they were sinking their collective will into a single, unstoppable force. Even the silence between monastic chants held purpose, carving spaces for the divine to enter. What's staggering is how little the core has changed. That playlist you queue up at the gym, it's the spiritual descendant of Spartan drummers driving soldiers forward. The ambient tracks you study to, direct heirs to the Pythagorean lyre vibrations that sharpened ancient minds. Every time you lose yourself in a concert crowd, swaying as one to the bass line, you're reenacting the same neural coupling that once bound hunter-gatherers around firelight. The instruments have upgraded, but the magic remains. Music still dissolves isolation, stitches communities together, and turns chaos into order with nothing but vibration. And here's the revelation, you're not just inheriting this legacy, you're extending it. That viral TikTok duet spanning continents. It's the modern Silk Road, where melodies cross borders faster than caravans ever could. The protest chant ringing through city streets, it carries the same DNA as the freedom songs that echoed through Pharaoh's courtyards. Even the algorithm-curated soundtrack of your daily commute is part of the continuum, proof that humanity still craves rhythm to navigate life's turbulence. So the next time you absent-mindedly tap your steering wheel or hum in the shower, pause, listen. That's not just you making noise, it's the echo of 100 generations who discovered that survival sounds sweeter when set to music. The ancients left us more than pyramids and parchments. They gifted us the ultimate tool for transformation, one that turns ordinary moments into rituals and strangers into kin. Now it's your turn to choose. Will your note be a whisper or a war cry, a lament or a lullaby? Press play, the past is listening.